Barely I got on stage, I got jammed up by police officers. Wait, I'm performing now. This is my concert. The officer snapped out that I was runaway criminal Nancy Black. What? Did they mistook me for my twin sister? I tried to explain that I was Tacy, and my family hadn't been in touch with this thug for a long time, but the policeman handcuffed me, and in front of the public, they dragged me out of the hall. I was bundled into a dirty van and told me they would return me to the colony, and for my escape, I would get another 10 years. From excitement, I began to choke. What are you doing? Let me go. I spent so many years working diligently to become a famous musician and make my way in life. After all, I had an example of my sister Nancy in front of my eyes, the thieving who so disappointed her parents. And now I went to jail instead of her. At the post, I was rudely patted down. They took all my things and gave me a jumpsuit. I was allowed to make one call, and in a panic, I dialed my parents. Mom immediately burst into tears. Dad promised to come up with something and asked me to be strong. But I was not allowed to finish. The guard took the phone and dragged me into solitary confinement. Everything was in cockroaches and mold. I was only thinking how I could get out of here. By the evening, the guards took me into the shower room. I was shaking, but only I ended up in the dressing room as I was surrounded by women prisoners. They began to shout that they helped me, that is, Nancy escape. In return, she promised to release them, but in the end, she just ditched everyone. A prisoner roughly grabbed me and pressed me against a wall. I was trying to break out. Please stop. And then a muscular girl in tattoos came into the dressing room. The woman froze and made way for her. Apparently, she was the main one here. She came up to me and said in a hoarse voice to go after her. The others whispered that now I was done. After all, Usher got tough on the issues. Usher took me into the toilet cubicle and loomed over me, glaring at me. I was going to get killed like a fly now. But then Usher said she knew right away I was not Nancy. I would have taken everyone down. And she added that I couldn't survive here. My sister Nancy had too many enemies. God, yes, those women would just eat me. What was I supposed to do now? Usher replied that I needed to make an escape. And she was ready to help. Why did this rude woman suddenly want to help me? Usher told me that she was contacted by my parents. They were her school teachers, and they knew she was in the prison now. In return for my freedom, they promised to take care of her little daughter who got into the shelter. Who would have thought that such a criminal might have a child? Usher said she could arrange my escape in a week. There was less security in prison on holidays, but I had to help her organize everything. But most importantly, to train hard, because I was too weak for escape. All night I could not close my eyes. I was afraid of Usher. But there were no other options to be free. From the next day, she made me do push-ups and wound-up circles on every walk. Prisoners were staring at us, but when Usher was around, I wasn't scared. On one of the walks, I was so out of strength that I even started crying. Then Usher felt sorry for me and allowed me to rest. She went to get water and suddenly I realized Usher was not around, which meant that the prisoners would tear me up. I tried to run away, but they already blocked my way. But we were called out by the guard. Gather for lunch. The prisoners began to leave, shouldering me painfully. It's not over yet, bitchy. One of them hissed. Already in the dining room, I met Usher, and she reported that she had a working idea. I was a musician, right? So I could remember the movement of the floodlights as a musical rhythm. Usher added that she played piano with her daughter. Suddenly I noticed tears in her eyes. But she turned away and pretended that she sneezed. I was surprised because there was so much pain in her words. I had no idea how she was suffering because of separation from her daughter. For the next few days, Usher continued to train me so I could get past the floodlights, which turned on in the prison yard under a special system. We memorized the order in which they turned on. Floodlights went along the rhythm of the waltz. 1 or 2 or 3, 1 or 2 or 3. 1 or 2 or 3. And soon I was making progress. I was engaged in music for so many years, not for nothing. Surprisingly, even Usher started praising me. There was one day before the escape, but we never decided what to do with the security. I'll talk them or hit them in the head. Usher offered to set a fire and distract the attention of security. But for this, she needed alcohol because it easily caught on fire. I was surprised, but Usher said they saw the rum in one of the cells under the radar, and now I needed to get it. These prisoners would definitely finish me. But Usher said it was time for me to learn to solve problems on my own. And she added, they were always afraid of Nancy, and you should take an example from her. Then at night, I neatly got out into the hallway and went down the wall to the cell where the prisoners kept room. As soon as I got to the door and sneaked into the cell, someone said in the dark that the mouse had come into the mousetrap itself. I froze in fear. At this very moment, I heard Usher's voice in my head. You need to solve problems on your own. Back to your bunks! I shouted hard and hit a light switch. Lights in the room went on. Prisoners froze and glanced at me. They obediently cleared the way for me, opening access to the bottles. I grabbed the first one and quickly exited the cell. I went back to Usher. Look what I got! But as she uncorked the bottle, she winced and shouted that it was tea. I took the wrong thing. I saw that Usher was very upset. I messed up her whole plan. But she already promised my parents to help me. Who else would look after her daughter? Usher hung down her head and began to remember how she and her daughter played the piano for the last time. And that's where it dawned on me. What if we put on a concert in prison? All security would be there and we didn't have to distract them. I offered Usher to speak with other prisoners. And at the concert, she would be able to play a waltz for me. And it would be easier for me to navigate when I escaped, when I got to the prison yard, and when I bypassed the floodlights. Usher looked at me and agreed. We would definitely do it. On the same evening, the administration got musical instruments for us. Every night, Usher and I rehearsed. And she managed to play well. Finally, it was the day of the concert. At lunch, I was terribly worried. It was necessary to take the keys from the guards somehow. I was hoping Usher would help me, but she was taken to set up the piano. What was I supposed to do? At this point, someone nearby choked with a piece of bread. At the same second, I also bit off the bread and began to depict that I was choking. The guard immediately ran up to me. Keys jingled on his belt. I reached for them and almost grabbed them. But suddenly I felt him knocking me on the back so I could start breathing. He got up from behind and there was no way I could get to the keys. Damn. The guard already headed to the exit. But I rushed to him and began to hug. You saved me. But he only rudely told me to get back to my seat. Then I returned to my table, rubbing the key in my hand. I got it! Encouraged, I ran to the hall to Usher. I wished her luck at the concert and thanked her for everything. But I suddenly hesitated. Saying goodbye was terribly sad. To that, Usher briefly said that it was time to do what we had been preparing for so long. I had to run right now, while there was still a chance. When all the security gathered in the hall, I walked discreetly into the hallway. I already opened a few doors and was at the exit, as suddenly I noticed the security guard next to it. Damn, why wasn't he at the concert? Not long thinking, I took off my sneaker and threw it to the other end of the hallway. The guard rushed there. I tiptoed my way to the exit. I inserted the key into the keyhole and suddenly the lock was jammed. I might not make it. In despair, I turned the key again and immediately popped into the prison yard. Barely stepping on the grass, I heard remote sounds of music. It was Usher. She was playing for me. TikTok. Strained to hear, I was carefully sneaking past the floodlights, orienting on the rhythm. 1 or 2 or 3. I walked almost to the fence, but suddenly Usher lost the rhythm, and that's when I slipped. Damn, the floodlight blinded me. There was a deafening siren wailing. And then I rushed to the fence. I had to get there. I got caught on the barbed wire and hurt my hand. But still I could jump down. I was amazed at my strength. It seemed Usher's training did me good. I think I was finally free, but here I was blinded again. This time by the headlights of the car. Frightened, I rushed into the bushes, but I did not have time. Someone grabbed my arm. I turned around and couldn't believe my eyes. In front of me was my sister Nancy, and what was she doing here? My sister angrily replied that she found out about my escape. That's why she came here to prevent it. After all, I'm Stacy now, the violinist, she said with a mockery. I was like thunderstruck. What was she talking about? This hussy stole my life? But Nancy said with a grin that it wasn't difficult. After all, looked the same. Nancy grabbed me firmly and dragged me back to the prison gate. I tried to fight back, but she was stronger despite my training. It seemed the game was over. No, I don't want to go back to jail. That's the end. But suddenly, I saw Usher behind Nancy's back. She took out my sister. Usher, what are you doing here? You just saved my life. I realized I screwed up with that rhythm in the tune. When I heard the sirens, she told me, now run quickly and know that Usher will always be around if needed. After a long road, I was finally home. I rushed to my parents and broke down how much I missed them. My dad said it would be fine now. Nancy and Usher were back in jail, and I got my life back. Having slightly calmed down, I told them everything, and they showed me a photo of Usher's daughter, an adorable baby. When I picked up the violin again, I thought for a long time what I would play, and I suddenly felt some melody. It was filled with sadness and my gratitude to Usher. I started playing it. A couple of days later, I sent Usher notes of the melody and wrote a letter which ended with the phrase, now at each of my concerts, this melody will be dedicated to you, the girl who taught me how to be a real bold. I ran into my sister's room. She had another heart attack and she was sitting and filing her nails. Sis, are you okay? Claire was very happy and quickly said that she had a task for me. Anything you want, I blurted out, but immediately regretted it. Claire asked me to take her place at the meeting with her fiancé. We were twins. Are you crazy? I'm not going anywhere with this spoiled jerk. Claire immediately clutched her heart and began to wail. Tonight, she had an important meeting with Bruce's father, Mr. Wayne. If all went well, Bruce would propose to Claire. And all I needed to do was to take her place while the real Claire was in the hospital. Well, no. Claire pleaded. Her treatment was very expensive and her parents were about to lose the house for debt. After marrying rich Bruce, we would have a fortune. Don't you want to help our family? Claire asked defiantly. Of course, I would do anything for the family. My sister interrupted me and began to give me instructions on how to behave. And she sent me the change. Bruce will be at our house in an hour. You should look stunning. Once again, I followed my sister's lead and got into an adventure. I hated her since I was a kid. She was always bossing me around like a senior, even though she was only born 3 minutes before me. How was I going to play Claire anyway? She was glamorous and confident. And I was clumsy plain Jane. How was I going to be able to match her buoyant boyfriend? But there was not much I could do. Now I had not to screw up and help the family. I ran home as fast as I could, and just as I was putting on my dress, Bruce's fancy car appeared under the windows. I was afraid that he would quickly understand everything, but Bruce didn't seem to notice and just kept hugging me. I can't stand him. He gave me instructions on how to behave the whole drive. Thank you. I've already been told everything. Shut up already. When we arrived at the mansion, Mr. Wayne was standing at the entrance, swearing horribly at the gardener. Yes, I would definitely have a hard time. I exhaled and forced a smile. I should be clear. I was moving towards Mr. Wayne when I suddenly tripped over a statue in the garden. I fell to the ground, and Mr. Wayne immediately rushed to the statue. Damn, its arm fell off. While Bruce helped me up, his father scolded me. How could I be so clumsy and inattentive? Bruce introduced me to his father and tried to lighten the situation by making an awkward joke that I might be clumsy, but I was a living person, not a statue. Bruce's father smiled tightly and, trying to change the subject, asked me how yesterday's event had gone. What was he talking about? Claire hadn't told me anything. I panicked and blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. Dances were rousing. But Mr. Wayne looked at me like I was a fool and said, "At the conservatory?" I thought about how to get out of it, but surprisingly, Bruce helped me. He said that the conductor had been so emotional that he had been dancing at the music stand. I looked at Bruce with gratitude. He had just saved me. Mr. Wayne said I wasn't much of a conversationalist, but Bruce told him I was a great golfer. Mr. Wayne was very happy and offered to play. I had never held a golf club in my life. Terrified, I trudged to the field. Bruce gave me a case of clubs, and I took the first one I could find. I closed my eyes, swung with all my strength, and heard a terrible scream. Heck! I think I broke Mr. Wayne's nose. I immediately rushed to apologize, but he roughly pushed me away and headed for the house. I wanted to cry out of desperation. I'd ruined everything. Now Mr. Wayne would never let Claire marry his son. I was thinking about what to say to Claire when Bruce came up to me. I waited for his anger, but he just laughed. Cool hit, by the way. I couldn't help but smile too. Wow. And Bruce was not such a bore. Then the butler called us to supper. Mr. Wayne was silent at the table, apparently still angry with me. Of course, I understand him. Trying to make conversation, I complimented one of the dishes. In response, Mr. Wayne arrogantly asked if I could cook the same way. I confusedly admitted that I didn't know how to cook. Bruce's father said disgustedly that a woman's place was in the kitchen and told me to wash at least the dishes. He pointed to the plates. Well, this is too much. In my anger, I shouted at Wayne that he was a tyrant and a misogynist. Wayne turned purple with anger and told me to get out. Oh my god, what have I done? What's going to happen to Claire now? I ran out of the mansion in tears. Bruce caught up with me at the gate. He said dryly that he had to go. I tried to apologize, but Bruce cut me off. We hit the highway, and then Bruce took a sharp turn into the woods. It was already dark and I was filled with fear. Was he going to kill me there? I tried to ask Bruce where we were going, but he didn't say anything. Suddenly, we stopped. My heart was pounding. Cautiously, I opened the door and got out of the car. And suddenly a fantastic view of the city opened in front of me. How beautiful. Then Bruce said there was no better place to... He paused. To what? Bruce got down on one knee and took the ring out of his pocket. He said I was the bravest girl he'd ever met. His father had no authority for a long time. He was always not happy with everything. So even if his father didn't approve of our wedding, Bruce still wanted to marry me. I was a wonderful, honest girl. What? I had never been told such words. So I did it. My sister Claire would soon recover. And my parents would still have their home. Yes, of course, I agree. And then Bruce kissed me. What? I didn't expect this and at first even tried to dodge. But then I relaxed and gave myself to feelings. I wanted the kiss to last forever. We watched the sunset for a while longer and then returned to the city. I didn't want to go home at all, so we went for a walk along the old streets. Bruce told me interesting things about houses. He knew a lot about architecture. I liked Bruce more and more. I had no idea that he could be so interesting. Bruce drove me home in the early morning. We kissed again, and elated, I ran into the house. And bumped into Claire. She was getting better, and she had already been discharged. Damn, I'd forgotten about my sister. Well, so now, am I the bride? She asked sharply. I remembered my kiss with Bruce and blushed. Unable to answer, then Claire noticed the ring. Diamonds! She exclaimed happily and unceremoniously pulled the ring off my finger. Claire said with a grin that she was pleased with me. For once, I didn't screw up, but then she would do it on her own. The next week, Claire was busy preparing for the wedding. She was in such a hurry to get married that the wedding celebration was decided to be held in a month. I kept thinking about Bruce. On the one hand, I felt guilty for deceiving him. On the other hand, I couldn't believe I'd been so happy with him that night. Just when I thought I was beginning to forget, Claire brought him to meet our parents. I was terrified. I had to stay in my room all evening. Even though Bruce knew about a twin sister, Claire told me to steer clear. But even in my room, I could hear Claire bossing Bruce. I put on my headphones so I wouldn't have to hear it all. And then the door opened and Bruce came in. He paused in the doorway. Confused. God, did he recognize me? But Bruce explained that he was looking for a bathroom. He was about to leave when he suddenly paused. For a second, I thought Bruce recognized me and he was going to give me a big hug. Of course, dream on. But instead, Bruce said that he was happy to meet me and hoped to see me at the wedding. I was in a lot of pain, but I agreed, fighting back tears. It was time to understand that Bruce did not love me, but my sister. On the eve of the ceremony, Claire persuaded me to go to the bachelorette party, but because of cocktails, she was free and easy. She called Bruce a rich kid and promised her friends a cool car at his expense. I felt sick and angry. Bruce didn't deserve to be treated like this. He was a great guy, not a bag of money. I took out my phone. He had to know the truth. But Claire snatched the phone out of my hands, shouting that I probably really wanted our parents to lose our house. And then she clutched at her heart. Stop faking it, Claire. I'm not buying it. I was already dialing the number, but Claire suddenly turned pale and fell to the floor. Oh my god, she was really feeling bad. I called an ambulance and we rushed to the hospital. The doctors were examining Claire and I kept walking up down the hall, and then the doctor came out. Finally, he was worried. He said that because of the frequent attacks, Claire's heart was very worn out and she needed an expensive operation or the next time the heart valve might fall. Oh my god. I ran to the ward. With the last of her strength, Claire called me over, calling me her favorite sister for the first time. She begged me to replace her at the wedding. I was so torn between my pain for my sister and my feelings for Bruce. Emotions overwhelmed me, so without answering, I ran out of the room. And here I was, standing at the altar in a gorgeous wedding dress. Bruce was there, so beautiful, so desirable, and now so inaccessible. A few more minutes, and he would be Claire's husband. I'd rather give her my heart if I could. Can I save my sister only at the cost of a lie? The priest started talking about true love, and I realized I couldn't fool Bruce like that. Stop! I shouted. The priest froze in disbelief, and the guests began to exchange glances. I threw up my veil and told Bruce everything. That Claire was in the hospital and I was Jane, her sister. And then at the meeting with his father, it wasn't Claire either, but me. I paused, unable to say a single word. I thought that Bruce would be furious, but suddenly he kissed me. I didn't understand what was going on. Bruce. Then he leaned over and whispered to me that he had noticed the change in Claire since the day I met his father. But he liked his Claire. Brave and strong, much more. And then he said out loud that it was with me that he wanted to be. I felt like I stopped breathing. Bruce nodded to the priest, who continued the ceremony, asking if I would take Bruce as my husband. I froze for a second, then said no. The whole room gasped, and Bruce was stunned. I told him honestly about Claire's operation and her parents' deaths. I didn't want Bruce to think I was using him for money. I could handle it all by myself and save the family. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I tried to leave, but Bruce grabbed my arm. He said that he would definitely help me, and deaths were not a reason to cancel the wedding. After all, he really loved me. I couldn't believe it. Absolutely happy, I kissed Bruce. Looking at us, the priest smiled. I think we can continue the ceremony. And I suddenly realized, the main thing is to follow your heart. It will always tell you the right way. We exchanged rings and started kissing.
Hi, I'm Sandy. Have your jokes ever gone so far as to make you scared for your or someone else's life? This is my sister Barbara. We're twins. Once we traded places, we only wanted some fun, but got into a bit of a situation. When we were little kids, our parents divorced and we were split. I stayed with Dad and his new family, and she stayed with Mom and her new husband. We live at a distance, but see each other often. Once we watched a movie where two twin sisters pretended to be each other. We thought it would be fun to do the same. We couldn't believe people'd buy it. Dad and my stepmom once had a hiking vacation, and Mom and stepdad were throwing a party. Barbara had always dreamed of a mountain hike, but Mom wouldn't let her. And I've been on a few and was ready to trade places. We swapped our clothes. I gave my sis my favorite red jacket. We also swapped phones. We couldn't believe our parents would buy it, but it was worth a risk. In the worst case, our parents would be angry, nothing more. Or we thought so. Being Barbara was pretty fun. The guests asked me things, and I tried to reply as if I were her. I said I had a boyfriend who read me poetry every day. It was fun at first, but then my discomfort grew. I felt really out of place. I had to wear a pretty but uncomfortable dress, use stupid table utensils I didn't know names for. People kept talking about stupid stuff like neighbor's new car. No one laughed at my jokes. I saw Mom was worried that the guests were judging me and finding my manners lacking. I didn't know what else to talk about. That hadn't happened to me before. Finally, I apologized, said I wasn't feeling well, and went to bed. I didn't get to sleep. Mom woke me up worried the next morning. Pale and anxious, she sat on my bed and said she had horrible news. I thought our lie was disclosed and was ready for a little scandal, but Mom said that Sandy, that is me, went missing. I was shocked. It must have been a bad joke. But Mom was serious. Have your relatives ever gone missing? Please share in the comments. I was scared. I had to tell Mom of our joke and that I was Sandy and Barbara was with Dad. Mom was horrified. She was unhappy and so worried about my sister, she almost wasn't angry at me. Mom said Barbara had gone tired and nervous quickly, had a fight with Edith, my stepmom, and decided to get back to the town. But she didn't make it home and her phone was off. I didn't get any calls from Barbara as well. I couldn't believe it. I knew she wasn't used to a lot of exercise, and Edith had a weird sense of humor. I hadn't thought it would go so far. But Mom wasn't mad at Edith or me, but at Dad. It looked like he didn't watch over one daughter and lost another. She was worried sick about Barbara. She wasn't used to the forest, could get lost, or worse. Mom and my stepdad and me went to Dad immediately. I was sifting through the possibilities of where Barbara could have gone. When we saw Dad, he was crushed. Edith looked guilty. I was feeling down for myself. If it weren't for our stupid idea, and I wouldn't let her go on a hike, this wouldn't have happened. We all wrecked our brains about what to do next. While there was a rescue operation going on, I started calling all of the friends. It turned out it wasn't for nothing. Martha, our friend, said she'd seen me in the city and even had a few words, though I'd behaved strange. I was going to ask for details, but the police called my parents at that moment. They said a young woman's body had been found in the river, and the description matched. We panicked. Neither of my parents could drive, so we took a taxi. I prayed it wasn't Barbara. We came and saw the body on the grass. The girl wore a red jacket, my jacket. My breath caught. The most horrible few seconds of my life. I looked closer and sighed with relief. It wasn't Barbara. Some other girl in a similar jacket. We were relieved, even though we felt sorry for the girl. And then my phone rang. It was Barbara. She was crying and asking if I was okay. Turned out she saw on the news. The mass media didn't bother to change the name. I was so happy. I wasn't even angry at her. When we got home, Barbara told what had happened. She was mad at Dad and Edith and didn't want to go home to them, but also didn't want to go back to Mom and spoil my fun. So she hitched a ride back to town and wanted to stay in a hotel. She was so upset about the fight with Edith that she drank a sleeping pill and was out for a day and a night. She didn't hear the calls, and when she woke up, she saw the news. We spent this night all together. Barbara and I shared a bed, and my parents slept where they could find a place. A few times I woke up to dreams of having lost her again. Now that it's all over, we decided to see more of each other, and Barbara and I realized that we all have a place, especially us twins. Do you have siblings? Do you have a fear of losing them? Share your stories in the comments. If you want more people to see this video, please like it, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell button to know when we release our next vids. Have a great day, and may your pranks never get out of control.